Buenos días a todos. Hoy voy a explicar y describir mi artículo Dos tipos de nobleza, el parecer de Francisco Suárez, que soportó la prueba de Morisco caballero Don Pedro de Granada Venegas a recibir el hábito de la Orden de Alcántara. Voy a continuar en inglés. This conference paper and article have emerged out of research for my doctoral dissertation at the University of California, Berkeley, which is now a book project titled Morisco Nights in Renaissance Spain, which is under contract with Brill. The book follows a family of Moriscos, or Muslim converts to Christianity, from when they were sultans in 15th century Nasrid, Granada, descended from Yusuf IV, to when they had successfully assimilated into the Spanish nobility, becoming the Marqueses of Campo Tejar in 1643. The book argues that the family drew on a number of strategies in their successful assimilation, including sponsoring a group of Renaissance poets in their home, serving the crown on the battlefield, and seeking membership in the Spanish military orders. Both Renaissance and chivalric culture were part of how they sought and defined their nobility. In 1607, the heir to this family, Don Pedro de Granada Venegas, applied to enter the military order of Alcántara. This conference paper and article come out of an analysis of the more than 300-page application, or prueba, he submitted to the Council of Orders, as well as an analysis of the letters of recommendation he solicited and received from a total of 50 theologians, including the eminent Jesuit Francisco Suárez, whom we are discussing at this conference. The pareceres, or opinions, of 24 theologians were gathered over the course of 1 month in Valladolid in 1602. At that time, the royal court of Philip III was also in Valladolid. The pareceres document began with a preamble that set up the question that the 24 theologians would seek to solve, whether or not the order's limpieza de sangre laws applied to Don Pedro de Granada Venegas. If the laws did not apply to him, he was eligible to enter the order of Alcántara. These laws excluded from the order anyone who is not a noble hidalgo of the laws of Spain and anyone who has a mix of, quote, converso, Moor, heretic, Jew, or criminal blood, but includes those with a lineage of old Christians. The 24 theologians, beginning with Agustín Antolínez in October 1602 and ending with the last theologian in November, unanimously wrote in support of Don Pedro, this elite Morisco's, desire to enter the order. It is clear that the document was passed from man to man because the later theologians refer to the opinions of those who wrote before them, sometimes by name. One of these theologians, canon and doctor of theology, Pedro González de Castillo, wrote that it was not right to exclude former Muslims from the military orders because that de-incentivized noble Muslims from converting to Christianity. Castillo explained that, quote, grace does not destroy nature, but before it perfects it. And the Christian religion does not diminish nobility, but before it increases it, improves it, and raises its qualities. And over nobility, religion appears so well as enamel over gold, unquote. For Castillo, nobility was inherent to a person, but religion and grace were added. A change in religion would certainly not remove prior nobility. Castillo creates an image of Don Pedro's natural self being noble, and the grace of Christianity covering its core like a cloak or like enamel over gold. After gathering the opinions of these first 24, Don Pedro solicited another 26 theologians to write for him by 1607, making the total 50. These opinions were also published in a printed document. All of these theologians, including Francisco Suárez, supported Don Pedro's application, again, this elite Morisco. They said that the prohibition against Moros entering the order did not apply to Don Pedro. This group of theologians included 4 Jesuits and several Dominicans, inquisitors, friars, and professors. It even brought together theologians who had disagreed on other issues, such as a Dominican and a Jesuit who had disagreed in the De Auxiliis controversy, Antonio de Padilla and Diego Nuño, as well as Francisco Suárez and his rival at the University of Salamanca, Gabriel Vázquez. All wrote in favor of this elite Morisco's quest to overcome limpieza de sangre. So, what was Francisco Suárez's argument? First, he wrote in 1603 that there were 2 types of nobility, civil and theological, of blood and of religious sincerity, and that Don Pedro had both. Second, he argued that custom was the best interpreter of law. And third, he argued that the voluntary conversion of the original Don Pedro in 1489 was key to his nobility. Quote, He converted, not forced by the victories which the Catholic kings had in the conquest of Granada. Instead, years before, moved by the grace of God, he converted, unquote. It should be noted, however, that the first Don Pedro received baptism privately in the rooms of Ferdinand of Aragon right after surrendering Baza in 1489 to the Catholic king after an extended siege. To contradict any claims that they did not have spiritual nobility due to their Muslim ancestry, Suárez quoted the 10th chapter of Romans, verse 12, saying that there was neither Jew nor Greek in Christ. He acknowledged the argument common at the time that those of Morisco lineage tended to fall away from Christianity, but argued that the Granada Venegas had proved in their case that such a judgment was incorrect. Suárez also wrote that the Alcántara statute, quote, spoke in general terms about descendants of Moors, but that this family was so special for being so noble and of royal blood and are so illustrious in Christianity and in zeal of faith, they would not likely, nor would be justly covered by such general terms, unquote. Rather, quote, custom is the best interpreter of laws, unquote. Suárez would make the same argument in his defense of the Catholic and Apostolic faith against the errors of Anglicanism in Latin in 1613, defending the long-standing traditions and customs of the Catholic Church against King James I of England. Thus, his recommendation for Don Pedro was consistent with his other theological works. The preamble to the Pareceres stated that Don Pedro, the applicant, had served, quote, Your Majesty, for more than 28 years in your royal house, for 6 years as a page in the service of Queen Doña Ana Our Lady, who is in glory, and in the battles in Portugal, and in Salobreña, and Almuñécar, and in other occasions in which he risked his life and property, unquote. Almuñécar and Salobreña were cities with castles on Granada's sea coast. This is a very clear statement linking service at court with service in battle. Don Pedro was a knight and a courtier. Both of these qualifications made him worthy to enter the Order of Alcántara, which was both a Cistercian fighting force and a club of high-ranking and well-positioned nobles. The Granada Venegas were literally knights who took up the sword for their sovereign, ecclesiastical knights, as Sam Zeno Canedra describes members of the military orders. They had never achieved the title of viceroy as other noble families like the Fernandez de Córdoba did, but the Granada Venegas had been part of the crown's major military campaigns and the vital defense of Granada's coasts. While there may have been a decline in the military orders' fighting roles in the early modern period, the orders themselves promoted the idea that they were fighting men. In fact, the 1629 Historia de las Órdenes Militares de Santiago, Calatrava y Alcántara, desde su fundación hasta el rey Felipe II, claims that the conquests of Peru and Mexico were ultimately the exploits of the military orders. Military identity was still vital to the Spanish nobility, and this is a theme that my book, Morisco Knights in Renaissance Spain, takes up with more length. Don Pedro was awarded the habit of Alcántara in 1608, which means he had been working on this project from at least 1602. His application was an extraordinary 300 pages in length, and he went to the trouble of enlisting 24 and then 50 theologians to write on his behalf. He clearly put effort into countering opposition. He was applying to enter Alcántara during the same years that the king's councils were pondering an overall expulsion of the Moriscos. The printed Pareceres of 24 and 50 theologians, written in the vernacular, could have been circulated at court to win him allies. While Morisco families who converted to Christianity prior to 1502 were exempt from the expulsion of 1609 to 14, having a habit of Alcántara gave Don Pedro and his family added protection. Social historian Enrique Soria Mesa refers to the Granada Venegas as the collaborator elite because they put down revolts of their fellow Moriscos, helped govern Christian Granada. The scholarly consensus is pretty clear that Morisco elite's treatment by Spanish authorities was substantially better than that of other Moriscos. However, I do not believe that the Granada Venegas had nothing to fear from the Spanish state simply because they were elites. Their striving for assimilation and noble titles continued for over 150 years, culminating with Don Pedro becoming the Marqués of Campo Tejar in 1643. I argue that the Granada Venegas needed Suárez's help and the help of the other 49 theologians to make their case against the statutes of limpieza de sangre, the case that their noble, royal Nazarene blood trumped their Moorish blood, making them worthy of all social honors in early modern Spain. Thank you.